Hello, everyone, and welcome to Writers Drinking Coffee. This is a podcast where a bunch of writers sit around, drink tasty beverages, and talk about writing, publishing, and the whole creative process. We do not censor ourselves, so consider us PG-13. Your host writers today are John Schmidt and me, Jeannie Warner. This is episode 130th, interview with Gail Carriger. Welcome, Gail.
Hello, hello. Thank you so much for inviting me and having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited. John said that you had joined his book club meeting. I'm like, oh, will she talk to us? Because that's exciting. I love your work.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm always happy to talk to a book group or a podcast or what have you. It's, I authors get pretty disconnected from their readers and, from real life in general. So yeah.
You make it sound like we all sit in a dark room with a small door that opens up and pushes through and a cup of coffee or glass of wine.
What do you mean you don't?
Oh, that would be so nice that actually someone gave me these things. But of course, everyone knows it. You have the chirp. I love the chirp. I'm not the only one who loves the chirp. Tell people, how did you come up with this amazing thing?
Non-sequitur man just picked up a fish. The chirp is my newsletter. How did I come up with it? Well, basically, I was like, writers need newsletters in this day and age. But I really want to make it super fun. And I want to make it basically the kind of thing that my readers would really enjoy reading, just like they do my books. So I try to write it in the same sort of tone and voice and everything, very chatty and gossipy. And that give myself permission to do it only once a month. So that means I can put some actual thought and care and work into it. And I drop fun little tidbits about what I'm working on. And I always have little offers and things that you can't get anywhere else. And it basically has allowed me to kind of pull back on some of my social media and stuff because I can just be like, look, that'll be in the chirp. If you really want to know, just get my newsletter. It'll be fine.
I love it because I had subscribed to Katie Murphy's, C.E. Murphy's, and now this one. And this is something that we haven't really talked about that much of how to promote yourself through something like a newsletter instead of, I don't know about you, but I am on the constant stream of people tweeting about, hey, I've got a book. Did you see my book, my pretty book, my cover, my hashtag? So you say this kind of heads that off for you. You don't feel obliged to sit on social media as much?
Yeah. And when I am on social media, I get to use it and the platform, sort of how it's designed and how I like to engage with it the most. So, and of course, I'll still say when I have a book out and stuff like that. I mean, I'm assuming if somebody has bothered to follow me on Twitter, they are following me because they like my books. So I just assume if anybody follows me anywhere, they're doing so because they like my books. That's why else do you follow an author? So presumably you would like to know if I have a new book out. So I'll let you know that. But most of the rest of the time, it's pretty Victorian clothes and some octopi and this crazy funny story of a thing that happened to me at a coffee shop and stuff like that, because that's what I'm interested in putting out into the universe is sort of fun, silly, pretty things.
I love it, but I'm going to argue because there's a couple people that I have learned to follow on Twitter just because I really like their snarky little insights. And Not in the, it's if people are going, constantly negative things, I tend to, okay, maybe I don't want that high on my feed, but I try to curate it to people that have clever things to say or interesting insights. And
yeah, but do you buy their books?
I buy many of their books.
Well, I guess it's working for them then.
Yeah. So it's,
but I just decided that because you can get booted off of Twitter super easily, or Facebook can just put your page down, or Facebook can just go down, and Twitter can do the same. I was like, well, I just kind of want a space where I sort of own it a bit more and I feel a bit safer. Also, I don't want to necessarily tell everybody, cough, my publishers, etc., certain parts of information, like projects I'm working on and stuff, because then everybody out in the social media world starts to think it's actually going to happen, or starts to put information on Goodreads that Gail's writing a blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, that was willfully misinterpreted. So instead, I feel like in my newsletter, I could be a little bit more honest about these kinds of things. And I can be like, look, I'm working on this series. This is the series name. It's not the title. And I just trust that the readers of the newsletter are going to be a little bit more thoughtful because they've taken the time to subscribe to it and presumably the time to read it.
Was it an evolution? Did you do something like a live journal or Dreamwidth before
Yes.
this?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm old guard. So I LiveJournal was my first blogging platform. Then I moved to Tumblr. Now I have WordPress and I do still blog, but it's just that a lot of people have moved off of blogging. And also a lot of people don't want to digest information that way. I don't like to digest that information that way. I prefer to like read a digest form of something and then go and deep dive into the articles that interest me. So I tried to construct my newsletter a little bit like that. Like, here's the events that I'm going to be at. Here's the, next live Q&A you can catch me at. Here's my recent releases. Here's my works in progress. And then here's like a crazy story about my cat and this insane, thing that happened to me as in my author life, and then here's, a little bit secret information about like a contract I'm working on and stuff like that. And that's part of like the promise I make to my newsletter. Like, if you want to know anything first, the newsletter gets it first. So I do cover reveals to my newsletter first. I do like total sneak, like for example, Amazon/Audible is being really slow and annoying and has been about uploading audiobooks. Mm-hmm. And so and they have an exclusivity contract. So, once you're uploaded to Audible, you can't be uploaded anywhere else. And so I was like, yeah, but they're taking forever to do this. And that's really maddening. And so I will offer it directly for sale until the moment that Amazon has it available, but only to my newsletter. So if you're in my newsletter, you can buy actual direct sale audiobook MP3s from me and then download and own them forever. And Amazon can never take them away from you. But then the moment that Amazon posts it, I can take it down immediately. And then I'm still in compliance with, so I can do like fun stuff like that, but only kind of with my newsletter because it's not public facing, basically.
Right. That makes a lot of sense on this. What is it like just waking up every day? I just imagine you sleep in the most beautiful dressing gown as the fairy godmother of
velvet. Silk velvet, mind you.
Well, absolutely. Silk velvet, maybe with, I don't know, a little bit embossing, some embroidery. You have to describe it, but there's lace. There's definitely lace and probably a ruffle.
Probably a ruffle or two. So what's it like? I hate to break everybody's bubble, but I am a normal human being. No. I'm sorry. I do have a predilection for silky, fabulous clothing, no matter what part of my life is involved. So there is that. I do live in a Victorian, so there's that.
It destroys my image. What do you feel that sometimes the expectations of the genre readers are that you're satisfying with all the Victoriana?
I think I think steampunk, like much science fiction and fantasy, is at its root kind of escapism in the best way. So the aspects of what interests me are the aspects of the old world that is similar to how we are today and different. So I put a very modern voiced character as a general rule as my main character in the past. And I tend to use a fish out of water conceit for that so that I can humorously describe what that past was like so far as I know and so far as I can play with and invent. And I think that like the ideas behind retrofuturism in general are sort of like, it has this touchstone of what the before times were like, but it also has this sort of surrealist element, this sort of skewed reality. And I think that's where a lot of this kind of nested appeal is.
I like the term retrofuturism. I don't think we really haven't really talked about that as much, but that does create an interesting question because with all of your voice of your characters, they do have a very modern, they would not sound out of place going on. You haven't gone off to try to say Zunes or any...
No, I try to make for me, the most important thing when I write is to make people smile and laugh when they read my books and to make them enjoy those books. And so I do tend to avoid those aspects of Victoriana that are going to make it difficult to read my stuff. My primary thing when I'm writing is that it be a fun thing to read, that it be comfortable. If you like that style. I do have Victorianish aspects to the way I write. Like I do like purple prose. I like amusing purple prose. I like alliteration. I like long words, kind of Victorianish sounding words. I definitely do sort of dialogue and sentence structure that's a lot more British, if not historical. So, I do have some things like that do make it feel a little old-fashioned, but I don't want to have that monkey around with the enjoyment of the prose or the story at all. And so it is sort of a delicate balance to tread. It's fun though, but that's because of what I want out the end is for people to have fun reading the books. And so I will sacrifice a certain amount of historical relativeness or historical realism, for lack of a better term, in order for the books themselves to be enjoyable.
It makes perfect sense. And you're going to have to answer a question that's been going through my head too, much in the way that I had been mispronouncing Carriger in my head for a while. So help me understand how to perfectly pronounce Lord Akeldama.
That's how I say it, Akeldama. So it's Aramaic, I think, originally in origin.
Okay.
So I don't know, and I don't think most would exactly how to pronounce that word. So I don't.
There are biblical scholars on that.
Yes, exactly. But that's how I pronounce it. And that's mostly because a later character in one of my spin-off series calls him Dama. So I always pronounce it that way in my head because I always knew she was going to exist and that is what she would call him. So I put the emphasis.
Is that prudent?
That's prudent. Yeah, that's a Rue. And that's because Dama is a combination of dad and mom. That's
secret knowledge.
Yes. So it's a little bit of a foreshadow because basically that's what he is to her. So yes, that it's Akeldama in my head, but I'm not entirely sure if that's actually how it's. I mean, I'm a terrible reader in that I can't pronounce anything properly because I learned everything by reading it.
I want to shout out there for a minute to everybody who learns their words by reading. I mean, I had heard the word Segway pronounced all of my life. And then the Segway ride the scooter thing came out. And then I saw somebody reading and they ran across the word, which in my head had always been Sieg, S-E-G.
Yes.
I'm like,
yes.
wait, what? My mind was blown instantly.
Yeah, it's so funny. And that still happens to me. Like I've 30 plus books to my name and I'm still like, wait, that's how that word is said out loud? Who knew?
Who knew?
I think it's beautiful. It means that everybody who mispronounces words like that, we can all with charity be in our heart think this person learned a word from reading.
Exactly.
And that's perfect. It's just, I don't want to sieg from one topic to another, but...
Yes, but some days you have to slap the octopus on the street and get on with it.
So long as you do it gracefully.
Yes. Well, that's straight out of your question blog off of your website. And for anyone who wants to know the full story, go there.
All the things are on my website. It is a repository of knowledge, at least very obscure knowledge about one weird, quirky author. But
I would just imagine if you ever were going to have the fully illustrated version of the Parasol Protectorate, would we get Brian Kessinger to do the art?
We are associated a lot. We've never actually met in person, but we both kind of like know about each other because in both of our books, his art and my books became popular right around the same time. And so there was a lot of people sharing my book with him and people sharing his art with me.
Otto and Victoria, yes. The octopus and the lady.
Yeah.
And you write about a lady and the bronze octopus, or many ladies. Actually.
Yes, there's an octopus thematic trope through all of my books because it's my favorite animal. So
I love a cephalopod myself. If we ever meet, you will find there's a lot of octopus everywhere from my shower curtain on out. So
yay! I love them.
They're the best. Well, they're smart, and
so
I'm convinced they're smarter than certain people that I've run into in my life.
I'm sure they are.
They're planners, they're plotters, they're also willing to cover their tracks up. I mean,
they're collectors of shiny objects.
They're collectors of shiny objects. I was reading something today that was a little bit of a minister who'd said, there was the discussion, is God of an octopus? I'm like, well, technically when you have the cross, it's 4 limbs plus 4, points is 8. So he just went home. And maybe a little bit of...
And when God made man in so many of the It's the original being was twice. The Greeks had the belief that we were split into men and women. We're always trying to rejoin and become an 8-armed perfection. And four-armed is 4-armed, but 8 arms is an octopus.
That's true. I, for one, welcome our new cephalopod overlords. But
there's a sci-fi book I read recently that hypothesized that that monkey-based or primate-based life is actually the least likely to evolve intelligence in the universe, and that most of the universe's aliens are cephalopodic or squid-like in some form or another, and that our form of alien is actually the most obscure. I thought it's a charming book. It's called Earth Fathers Are Weird, and I highly recommend it.
Earth Fathers Are Weird. I love it. You just made me think of the short story, and we mentioned it recently from Terry Bisson, They're Made of Meat.
Yes.
What do you mean you don't want to eat them? They're made of meat. I always think when I'm at a spa getting a seaweed wrap or anything that I'm just being because I've also come out of a hot tub or a sauna or whatever. So I've been basically sort of marinating and tenderized, and I'm blanched, and now I'm getting salted and rubbed and scrubbed. And I'm oh, I'm being prepared for a barbecue. There's no other explanation but that the aliens are coming soon to get me.
Aliens.
It's an alien izakaya mai, really.
Yeah.
So, Anu Sieg, over this way, you have a book out called The Heroine's Journey. And for a lot of people, we've grown up with Joseph Campbell and Jungian theories on the hero's journey. Tell us about the heroine's journey.
Well, I learned about both of them, and both the hero's journey and the heroine's journey, because my background is as a classical archaeologist, which meant I had to take a lot of classics class, which meant I ended up in a lot of gender and narrative analysis of the classics, because that's what particularly interests me. And so I came into being a professional writer and going on the convention circuit and things like that, believing that everybody knew there were two. And also that everybody thought of them as narrative analysis, because while we read and studied Campbell, the focus for my studies was mainly the sort of beats and trope usages and stuff like that of the story structure, rather than the Jungian side of it. Right. So I should say that Murdoch has a Jungian analysis for the heroine's journey, but my particular interest is always in story structure. And so finally I was well, where is the book on the heroine's journey story structure? Because people keep asking me about it, and I keep talking about it at cons. Everybody should know what I'm talking about. And somebody always raises their hand in the audience and says, what's that? And how is it different from the hero's journey? And so finally, after a decade of this, I was maybe I should write that book.
Well, it's good that you did, because the first one out in the field, I think, that really sort of had that version for women. If you discount Kate Elliott's Duran series, you get something like Jupiter Ascending, that all in one book, a cleaning toilets, discovers a legacy, has to do a lot of paperwork. The paperwork make it real for me, by the way. So, and then, how the cycle and coming back to where she was. So tell us how your heroine's journey works.
It's very similar, sort of basic beat-wise. It's kind of similar to the hero's journey in terms of withdrawal and return and crossing a threshold. It's just the heroine's evaluations of what defines strength, and her goals and her motivations are completely different from a hero's journey. And I should say from the start that these monikers are gendered by the titles that we have given them. They aren't actually biologically. It doesn't have to be a man on a hero's journey or a male, and it doesn't have to be a woman or female on the heroine's journey. Anyone, male, female, non-binary, can be on a heroine's journey. Use her because it's cribbed, and unfortunately, most of the narratives we have to study from ancient structures are pretty binary. So anyway, the heroine, generally speaking, is sparked on her journey by a familial network being broken, somebody being taken from her, her lover, husband, daughter, sister, something like that. And that is what causes, and then she commences a search. So unlike a hero, it can be a quest, but really it's more of a search. So what she's looking for and what motivates her in general is reunification and family, and in the case of a romance novel, coupledom, etc. And she engages in a cycle that's not dissimilar from a hero's, where she has a descent. She continues on her search. A heroine is aided, where heroes rarely are, or if a hero is aided, his aid is usually taken from him or killed. heroines are Aiden. So heroine's journey often turn into sort of group narratives where she has a familiar or a companion or friends along the journey with her, and they are helpful and assistive. And she's very good at delegating and identifying where they are good at something that perhaps she may not be as strong as, that sort of a thing. So heroines make great generals, for example. And then during the course of her quest, she eventually manages to reunite with what was taken from her or rebuild what was taken from her, and either finding the lost daughter or the lost family member and reuniting, or building herself a new family in some guise. And that is attained through compromise, generally speaking, for a heroine. And these are all good things, and they're seen as positives under the course of the narrative. So compromise can come off as a dirty word. Asking for or needing help or having assistance can come off as dirty concepts, especially in Western American thought. But the heroine's journey always sees that as strength. The ability to say, I need help with this thing, or you, my best friend, are going to be way better at slaying that dragon than I am. I'm going to go research how to deal with this other thing while you slay the dragon. Those are sort of seen as weak under the context of the hero's journey in particular, and in our own culture and zeitgeist as a result. And it's unfortunate because the heroine's journey doesn't see those as weaknesses, it sees them as extreme strengths. And so as kind of a side effect of that, the heroine's journey in general has kind of been critically disenfranchised and sort of ignored. So narratives that end with connection and partnership and unity and happiness, tend to be pretty critically ignored in both popular culture and the literary world.
Just the fact that the largest genre of that, outside of folk punk, which isn't that large, is the romance novel. Mm-hmm. And the romance novel, which is an art form, is usually denigrated.
Yes, very, very much. It's definitely pillarized. It's still a battle to get credit for being a romance writer, to own that identity without shame or disgust. It's still a genre that all other genres feel very comfortable punching down to, which generally causes me to lose my tiny mind, clap slowly, and accuse whoever's doing it as participating in 200 years of misogyny, because this all ties back to the rise of the Gothics and the education of women and the first female writers of fiction en masse.
I have to say your mind is not tiny nor lost that you know all that history and can bring it to bear. I just think if you want to tell me you hate romances, you're having a bad hissy fit and really need to calm down and read a few romances. And I recommend your romances, especially.
Yes, it's so true. You're right. Maybe if you're freaking out that much, you probably need a little romance in your life.
I don't know. I want to at least a shout out to Outlander, which finally leapt from historical romance, onto the screen, and everybody wants to watch it now. So I think maybe we might be in the age of the new romance is okay again. Bridgerton.
I hope so. Bridgerton caused quite a fuss. Yeah, there's a part of me that thinks, this narrative theory and demographic analysis of popular fiction and stuff like that is one of my dilettante hobbies. I'm totally fascinated by it. And I have all of these theories about what happened during lockdown in the past year, a part of which is that if you study pop culture theory, there's a great book on the Hollywood industry called Sleepless in Hollywood by Linda Oates, which basically talks about the death of the comedic movie like Sleepless in Seattle or When Harry Met Sally, which there just aren't that many of them anymore. There used to be so many, and they've sort of died down. And the tentpole movies have instead the tentpole movies like superhero movies, these huge, and all of this has to do with the simple fact that the demographic that is catered to is the same demographic that tends to read romances. And I'm talking in very broad brushstrokes here, but it is women ages 25 to 65. And that particular demographic, which Linda Oates calls the apple pie demographic, has a history of never sitting down to watch a movie, never sitting down to do anything because they always have other things to do. So they're but what happened with lockdown was they all sat down for a while, and suddenly K-dramas became hugely popular. K-dramas are predominantly romances.
Yeah, they are.
And just to be clear, by K-drama, you mean Korean drama?
Yes, Korean dramas.
For our listeners, thank you.
Yeah, they tend to be long-form romances, basically. And I know everybody's watching Squid Games, but the vast majority of K-dramas. But and we also saw things like Bridgerton be hugely popular, and I think a lot of that has to do with that for the first time in a long while, the demographic that's catered to with those dramas was actually still and willing to watch. I'm not sure once the world opens back up again if that's going to continue, but we'll see.
I have to say that there's part of me that hoped. I started watching The Expanse because everybody loved it, and lest everybody shoot at me, I stopped when I thought that it was Naomi Nagata's heroine's journey. And at the end of the season 1, when she's like, I just don't want to make any more command decisions. And here, why don't you take all my clothes off, you great big man, you. And I lost it there because it's like, I loved her. I loved the conflict. I loved the witch is in charge. Who's going to be the leader? I thought that was made for amazing drama. And then she's like, I give it up and you can sleep with me too. It's like, okay, I'm out. And I have not been able to bring myself to watch anymore.
I haven't watched it myself, so I can't speak to the kind of betrayal that you're discussing. But I will say that often when watchers or readers feel a tremendous sense of betrayal, it's because they've been unconsciously feeling that they've been on, for example, a hero's journey, and it suddenly became a heroine's journey, or vice versa. Or it's just that like foreshadowing or what have you wasn't set up under the context of the narrative in such a way that you're just like, well, that seems out of character. And I think as storytellers, as writers, it behooves us to pay very, very close attention to when we feel that sensation and that frustration, and to really try and step back and analyze why. Like, what was it about how that character was written until that point, or depicted on the screen until that point, that upset you or upset the fan base in such a way? And how, as writers, can we personally avoid doing that in our own works going forward? Like, what lessons can we learn from this? It's terrible. I'm a comedic author by preference. That's what I would describe myself primarily, because I dabble in so many different genres. And it's made it very difficult for me to watch anything funny, because every time I laugh, I have this instinct now to stop and be like, why was that funny? Why did I laugh? Which comedic, what was being applied? Was a rule of 3? Like, why that? Why is that so funny? So it is I call this the bleeding editorial eye, which I hate to tell everybody who's an author out there, this is going to get worse and worse.
Sorry, we have not really discussed deeply into the rules of comedy. So, that's a topic.
But like, just in general now, it's really hard for me to read as a pure reader anymore. I'm always like, why 3 of the same word in 2 sentences, that kind of thing will happen to me. And I'll just be like, God damn it. And I can't, it's really hard for me to turn that aspect of my brain off and really just get lost in a book, the way I maybe did as a teenager.
Yeah. If you can see the hooks everything is suspended from, it's the classic, if you do the technical aspect of theater, all of a sudden you see everyone wearing black.
Yes, but also you can also admire it. Like, there's also a part of me that's like, yes, but look how gracefully that person in black is moving across the stage. There's a point at which you're like, okay, I can't really just appreciate the play anymore, but I can really appreciate how beautiful the set is built or what have you. Like, you can still enjoy it. It's just the enjoyment of peers rather than, the immersive experience of being the reader or the audience anymore. There is
the third stage to this that I don't know if a writer ever reaches, because I'm not much of a writer in this way, but when you get to the point where you've seen a production, I'm going to use Midsummer Night's Dream, because I have seen Midsummer Night's Dream a lot.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Over 30 times, I think, where you've seen it so often that your mind just relaxes and goes, oh, okay, that's how that's done. And you can just keep your disbelief and revel in my God, this is an amazing puck, or wow,
yes,
the couples make so much sense this time, or that's a fascinating way to do the accents to show the different class levels.
Yeah, I know. I love it. This is a total segue, but one of my favorite things in the universe is seeing Austen or Shakespeare and certain other plays with which I'm particularly familiar, reimagined and readapted in different settings or with different characters or what have you. So I was in a performance of Oklahoma when I was a kid, a very long time ago. And then I've seen it, of course, several times live. And I've also, I love musicals. And then I was recently up at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival in Ashland, and I saw they did an entirely queer cast queer adaptation of Oklahoma. And it was so unbelievably good. It made me re-examine everything I knew about that play, everything I thought about that play, and the audience was just so riveted by it. And it was one of those audience experiences where everybody gasps at the same time. And it was just the most magical thing. I would sell a kidney for a recording of that performance.
Do not tell them that. Do not.
It was so good. So I mean, that is the other. You're right, and that will happen to me with a book. There are books where even now I will pick it up, and they do manage to take me back to that writer fugue state, where I stop seeing any craft in it, and I'm just back being absorbed in the story. It does not happen to be very often anymore, but when it does happen, I'm just I can't even write to tell you why I loved this book so much. It did that thing where I just freaking loved it. And you should all read it. And I can't tell you why, because that whole part of my brain turned off. And I'm just reveling in the fact that this book was magical enough to do that to me.
It's like flopping around in a beautiful, perfect swimming pool with all the right temperatures and all the right floating points.
Exactly.
So what are you working on right now?
So I'm working on sci-fi. So I had a brain hiccup during the last year and a half, which I think many do, and a lot of family drama and stuff like that, which I think many did. And I stopped being able to write for a while, which did not freak me out as much as it probably should have, but also has happened to me before. So I was like, okay. Fortunately, I've arranged my career at this juncture in my life where it's okay for me to take some time off. I have money saved up, and I don't have to constantly be slaving over a computer, although I do not like disappointing my readers. And the thing that my brain re-latched onto when it started finding its muse again was science fiction. Clearly, I wanted to leave the planet. I was like, oh, okay, we want to go away from Earth. Fine. Okay, brain. And since it was all I wanted to write, I was like, you can write it. Just write it. Because I had been trying to write anything and nothing had been coming out. And so I just let myself write whatever I wanted to. So I wrote a sort of very quirky, get this out of my system project, which is now sort of just came back from the developmental editor, and I am terrified to read it. Yes, at 30 books, that still happens.
That's so comforting too. Yes.
It's kind of sitting off to one side, and I'm like, when I have the courage, I'll reopen that one. Because it's real weird and quirky and kind of almost serialistic rather than actual story-ish. Anyway, it's a strange thing. It's a strange beast. And then my brain was like, sci-fi. We are very happy and comfortable with this. And during the course of COVID, one of the things I became incredibly fascinated by was the Hallyu wave, which is the Korean drama K-pop culture wave that's been happening. That's kind of is somewhat intentional from South Korea's standpoint in terms of manipulating audience expectations, story structure, musical structure, in order to appeal to the widest, most international base possible. I think it's absolutely fascinating. It sparked all of these ideas about culture and whether a war can be waged with entertainment, and what form that might take. Yeah, and what effect it might take, and and then I got into what's called sassy fans, which are obsessed fandom, which is always something that's kind of both terrified me and interested me, which is the obsessive nature of people around celebrity and notions of celebrity. So then I got on deep dives where I ended up reading articles on JSTOR about football hooliganism. These are the things that happen when you're writers, right? Because a lot of the early research on fan obsession is, of course, the jocks. There's now more research on nerd fan obsession, but all the early research was all sports related. So
let's remember that John Hinckley Jr. had his crushes, and she was an actress. So.
Yes. Yeah. Then there's there's individual. I got into group mentality and group obsession. Like, why does his mass euphoric hysteria happen at like music concerts and stuff like that? So, and this has led me to my current writing project, which is a 3-book series. I'm going back into series. I've only written kind of spin-offs and standalones for quite a few years now. And I decided to really tackle this whole mess of a thing that my brain was very excited about. It needed 3 whole books that follow a human who is recruited by aliens to become a mega star, and goes through a training program, which has very program aspects to it. And then he's now on tour. And then eventually we will have him sort of uncover everything that's kind of going on with these aliens and this entertainment system and what they're actually doing and what they're trying to do and all about them and all that sort of. So it's a big, wide sweeping concept, space opera, which I'm calling putting the opera back in space opera, because I never met a pun I could leave alone.
That's beautiful. And we will put links to it, as well as how people can sign up.
Oh, no, you won't. It doesn't exist. It doesn't. There's no way to. You can't pre-order it.
You're going to be talking about it on the chirp.
On the chirp. Sign up for the chirp.
Exactly. Yeah. If you want to hear about it, that's where you can hear about it. Because if I start talking about this, like in written form online, people are like, where is it? I want to buy it. And I'm like, it's going to be months before this thing comes out.
And we'll put that on our website, which is www.writersdrinkingcoffee.com. You can find us on Facebook or Twitter. Gail, thank you so much for being with us today. This has been fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me. I feel like we ranged over a lot of topics that I hope some of the listeners found some use in.
I found plenty of use. I am now saving my money for this series of books. I may ask if Subterranean Press will fire them. I want to know if they're in the 5 genders. Yeah, I'll shut up and read them.
It is, in fact, in the 5th gender universe, yes.
Excellent. See, now we know something.
Now you know something.
Everybody should buy everything that Gail writes.
And most of what I read, too. I'm always talking about what I read recently and what books I'm always recommending other books as well. Yes. I like to pimp other authors as much as humanly possible, because I can only write at most 2 books a year.
Okay. You've been listening to Writers Drinking Coffee, a labor of love and enthusiasm put together by the hosts. Our main web support magic is by Deirdre Schween, and our sound engineer and backup web spider is Dave Welsh. Our intro music is Pretty Maid Milking a Cow, and our exit music is Breakfast with the Morning Person, both by Michael Langberg. You can hear more from Michael Langberg on manyhatsmusic.com. Our podcast sponsor is Jackal Designs, and whatever favorite coffee store is near you. And hey, thanks for listening.